Welcome, and thank you for joining our webinar today. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us and learn about how to care for your elderly loved ones. My name is Myra Medina. I'm the estate planning coordinator for the Kopenbarger and Kopenbarger law firm. Your presenter today is Lloyd Kopenbarger, and he is the founder of our firm. Lloyd has been practicing law for over 40 years. He has a master's in taxation. He's a certified specialist in probate, estate planning, and trust law by the State Bar of California. Lloyd has trained dozens of attorneys throughout the years, and he has led our firm in serving over 40,000 clients across the state. So you'll find that Lloyd takes the very complex and makes it simple. So without further ado, I'd like to present attorney and founding partner, Lloyd Kopenbarger.
Thank you very much, Myra. It is a real pleasure to be with you today. Well, let me take a few moments to introduce myself and this subject to you. First of all, it's a subject that I've had personal experience with. Many years ago, my mother, who was a teacher, taught until she was 75 years old, was nominated as Teacher of the Year for the state of Arizona in the year of her final teaching. When she came from where she was working to live with us, we noticed that her memory had seriously deteriorated. And when we had her examined, we found that she was suffering from that horrible condition that we call Alzheimer's. And we had the responsibility of caring for her until she could no longer be cared for at home, and then dealt with the transition to care in a care facility. Presently, we're providing care for my 95-year-old, she will be 96 this month, aunt. Aunt Dolly is a lady who never married. She was a professional woman all of her life. And this has been a very difficult transition for her to recognize the reality that she can no longer take care of herself. Let's just face it, she refuses to accept the fact that she cannot care for herself. And so this process of dealing with these issues is very emotionally ridden. It is very complicated because everybody's situation is slightly different. Everyone deals with these issues slightly differently, but there are common threads that you can find that will help you in dealing with the decisions and the steps that have to be taken to care for your elderly loved ones. First of all, though, let's talk quickly about some of the concerns that the elderly have. Probably the most serious concern is the fear of becoming ill. Part of that fear of becoming ill in our time is the fear of losing our memory, the loss of the ability to remember, to relate, whether it be mild dementia or whether it be Alzheimer's, is an ever-present fear for the elderly. I like to say that if people who were 38 had to meet the same standards of remembering that those of us who are older do, there'd be a lot more concern because a young person can forget where they left the keys and nobody even thinks about it. Once you pass 70 and you can't remember where you left the keys, you're becoming senile. And so this is sometimes an unfair standard, but it's based on the reality of life. Another concern that the elderly have is outliving their money and becoming a burden on someone else where they don't have the financial resources to provide for their care. And that's a very real concern, particularly when the cost of care is as great as it is. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. And then the elderly have a concern about themselves having to care for an elderly relative. One of the things that I deal with constantly in my practice are situations where one spouse is no longer able to care for themselves, and the other spouse does not want to place them in a care facility, and they attempt to provide for their care themselves. And the sad fact is many times the person who is the caregiver is the one who dies first because of the stress and because of the activities that are involved in trying to provide for that care. Equally with that is the concern about outliving their spouse. Everybody wants to be the one that goes first. That seldom occurs if you're the woman. And then finally, all of us have a little bit of fear of the experience that we will only experience once in this lifetime, and that's the experience of dying. And if you're a person of faith, that is an issue. If you're not a person of faith, then as we get older, we come to grips with the reality that once we're born, death is a certainty. And so those are the kinds of things that seniors have to be concerned about. Now, a person who provides care for a senior has to be aware that physical energy, physical effort, and emotional effort is involved in providing care, and that is exhausting. For example, one of the things that I've seen frequently is the person being cared for may be a very large person, and the person who is trying to provide the care may be not so large or not so strong, and they can injure themselves trying to help someone get up if they fall. They can injure themselves trying to help someone out of a bed into a wheelchair if that person's not ambulatory. And so these are very real physical concerns that a caregiver has to be concerned about. You also have to be concerned about who takes care of the business aspects of that person's life, checking the mail, paying the bills, taking care of property maintenance if there's property to be cared for. It's impossible to have someone living in your home in addition to yourself, whether you're the person being cared for or whether you're the caregiver, without increased expenses of utilities and gas and groceries. And almost in every case, there will be a severe need to adjust your daily life and schedule to accommodate the need to provide for the person you're caring for. That involves time, and the problem with time is many times the other people who are in the lives of your loved one do not give credit for the effort that's involved in providing that care. And being a caregiver is a time-consuming, all-encompassing responsibility. And one of the things that you as a caregiver should think about is making certain that you have some time to get away from that responsibility and have someone who can step in and provide care for your loved one while you have a chance to, as I like to say it, get away and recharge your batteries, get your emotional life back together, get your mental focus back so you can provide the loving care that can become very difficult to provide when you're dealing with someone who is telling you, I don't like you, I don't like the food you prepare, you stole my money, you stole my rings. And if they communicate that to other people, it creates a situation where, because there are people who do those kind of things, sometimes you're in a position of being guilty until you prove yourself innocent. And then, do they have the financial resources to provide help? Many times, the senior doesn't. And the effort that's involved is a all-encompassing effort. It's even greater than providing care for a newborn child. Remember, you need to take care of yourself first. Make sure that you take into account your own physical needs. Don't put yourself in a position to injure yourself. You cannot care for someone you love and care about if you are physically ailing yourself. And again, I can't overemphasize the necessity of providing for your mental wellness. Get some time for yourself. Get away from the situation. Always remind yourself in the later stages of a person's life that you're dealing with someone who is almost like a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old child. They can be rebellious, they can be resistant. And be honest with yourself and your family as to what you're dealing with. And communication with the loved one and with the people who love the loved one is critical, because if you let them know what you're dealing with, that helps them realize what you're contributing, number one, and help them agree to participate in that responsibility to the extent possible. And if you absolutely need it, get professional help. As an attorney, I know how to provide solutions to some of the legal issues that have to be dealt with in dealing with the care of another adult. Sometimes you will need someone who is a mental health professional, both for the person who's being cared for and sometimes for yourself. Don't be ashamed and don't be afraid to seek that help when it's needed. Remember, this is going to add stress for the entire family. Everybody in the family is going to be somewhat displaced in their lives by the presence of the elderly loved one you're taking care of. But also remember, it's difficult for them. It's difficult for them to adjust to a new home. And as the years go by, one of the things that happens to almost all of us is we become paranoid. We become suspicious. We don't trust ourselves because our memory isn't always good. We don't trust other people because we lose things and we assume they took them. And so these are issues that the caregiver has to be prepared to deal with. And the other thing is sometimes the elderly become very manipulative. You're trying to help them, you try to give them medication, they figure out ways to pretend they're taking it but not take it. And that can result in health issues that are totally unnecessary if you don't develop methods to make sure that the treatment that they are requiring is in fact provided to them. And you'll hear things like, I don't need to be here. I don't like this. I don't like you. You're stealing my money. You're stealing my jewelry. Those are things that you must prepare yourself for, or you will be mentally and emotionally hurt by these kind of words coming from someone who was a loving part of your life prior to the circumstances of the passage of years. Now, what are the things that you can do to plan ahead of time to reduce these kinds of concerns? Well, first of all, you have to evaluate the circumstances, and this is a continuing evaluation. When you start the evaluation process, it's quite possible that the person can continue to live at home with someone checking up on them periodically or occasionally. I just completed the care for a lady that I had responsibility for about 20 years. And in the latter part of her life, her mental capability was good. Physically, she was frail. And so she didn't want anybody in her home at night. And so we provided people there during the daytime to make sure that she was properly fed, to to make sure that she didn't fall, that any need she had was met. But she didn't want anybody in her home at night. And so what was the dilemma? I couldn't leave her unprotected. And so we created a technological way to keep check on her at night with a caregiver who would watch her on the monitor to make sure that in the night she didn't get up and fall and need assistance. And that satisfied her concern to have the privacy and the privilege of living alone at night. It also provided for safety and security for her 24 hours a day. When the time comes the person can no longer be cared for at home, then it becomes a question of where will they be cared for? Now, if their financial resources are available, sometimes an assisted living facility is the answer. If the financial resources are not there, and sometimes they're not, because assisted living is going to cost somewhere between $4,000 and $8,000 a month, depending on the care facility and the level of care that's required. If they don't have the financial resources, then someone is going to have to assume that responsibility and provide a care place for them. And many times that is a daughter, many times that is a daughter-in-law and the son, but whoever is in charge of that is going to incur healthcare costs. And there needs to be some discussion or understanding as to who will share in that responsibility, or whether it's something that the caregiver is going to have to assume full responsibility for. If you're the person who is going to need the care, this is something you should discuss with the family and let them know who you want to live with. Make certain that the person you would want to live with can in fact carry the responsibility of your care. And then you have to decide who can make decisions for you, because the decisions that have to be made are not just simple decisions. They involve legal matters, they involve medical matters, they involve your personal desires and wishes. And if nobody knows what your wishes are or what your desires are, those desires cannot possibly be met. And if you're the caregiver, if no one has discussed with you and with the person you're caring for how they want to be cared for, then you're literally throwing darts in the dark. You don't know whether you're accomplishing what the person wants or not. And so I encourage you to get these kinds of decisions discussed, and when you need to, ask for more help. Now, what are the legal documents that need to be had in the case of every elderly person? And fortunately, in the case of my Aunt Dolly, about 3 years ago, she asked me to prepare an estate plan for her, and she asked me to be responsible for her care when she was no longer able to care for herself. Now, she will tell you today she doesn't need any care and that I'm just taking over her life. But the reality is that she was having hallucinations. She was not eating properly. The police were being called as a result of those hallucinations, and they were preparing to take her into custody because of that condition. And so it's absolutely critical that a person have the following documents as part of the planning process. First of all, a very well-prepared advanced healthcare directive. And that's a legal document in which you can say who is to make medical decisions for you. If they're not able to do it, who replaces them. And it also allows you to give guidance as to some of the decisions that might have to be made. For example, do you want to donate organs or tissue? Would you want an autopsy performed if you died under suspicious circumstances? Uh, where do you want to be buried? What kind of funeral arrangements do you want made? Do you want to be cremated or do you want to be buried? These are all issues that can be discussed in the Advanced Healthcare Directive. You also can have a real discussion as to what decision needs to be made when it appears there's no longer any hope for you to recovery and you're in a life ending circumstance. In other words, when does the plug get pulled? And it should be coordinated in such a way that you make the decision and the person who is named in your advanced health care carries out your wishes. That eliminates dissension in the family, that eliminates people making accusations that you kill mother or you kill dad. Those kinds of things need to be clearly understood, and the legal authority to do it needs to be clearly established. You also should have a financial power of attorney. Somebody needs to be able to file tax returns for you. Someone needs to be able to handle business matters. If you're going to be living in a care facility, almost certainly that care facility is going to want someone other than you to sign as a responsible party for the payment of the expenses. And the person who has that power of attorney can sign those papers on your behalf without having to personally become liable for those expenses. You also should have a living trust. If you have financial resources that have value that would be subject to probate if you were to die, or subject to conservatorship if you were to become disabled during lifetime, this would mean anything like an automobile, a car, your home, bank accounts, all of the financial resources of your life can be held by a revocable living trust, and it eliminates the need for probate. It eliminates the need for conservatorship if you become mentally or physically unable to act for yourself. And then I like to encourage you to create a pourable will, remembering that that pourable will doesn't give anybody anything. It's just a safety net that catches any financial resources of value that are left out of your trust, either deliberately or inadvertently. Now, the Advanced Health Care Directive, the Durable Power of Attorney, one of the things you should do in both of those documents is provide language that will establish how your incapacity is to be determined. This was a critical benefit in the documents that I created for Aunt Dolly, because she does not believe that she needs any assistance. But when we created the documents provided that I could have her examined by a physician, and that physician could give her tests to determine what her competency was. And then based on the physician's determination, I would be able to step in and take responsibility for handling her finances and handling her personal affairs. If you don't have this kind of language in your documents, you're forced to go into court and have a judge determine whether or not your loved one is competent or not. That is expensive, it's time consuming, and it's distressing. When you take advantage of this kind of preventative planning, it gives you the opportunity to make choices, and it allows you to establish the ground rules as to how your loved one is to be cared for by them, communicating that to you. And if you're a participant in this process, it allows you to help frame the planning in such a way that it gives you the ability to carry out the activities that ultimately you're going to be responsible for. One of the things that people are not aware of is that you can, under California law, arrange your financial affairs in such a way that you can qualify to receive Medi-Cal benefits in the case of the need for long-term skilled nursing care. And basically, that Medi-Cal qualification is protection against the state of California after your death seeking reimbursement from your financial resources for the cost of your care. And it also has the advantage of preserving your financial resources by paying your bills during your lifetime. And if you're a married person, that means that your spouse has the financial resources that would have otherwise been spent providing for your care available to provide for their needs. And also, I believe it allows you to protect financial resources to provide an inheritance to your children. Now, there are people who have different views about this, but my view is that most of the time you're the person who has paid the taxes to provide the benefits of this provision of California law to people who have not provided any resources to the program. And if you obey the law and follow the rules, I see no reason why you should not utilize these benefits to provide for your needs and to protect the people you love and care about. And if you're the caregiver, you need to be aware that these resources are available and will not totally diminish the estate to provide this protection to your loved one when you no longer can care for them yourself. Now, one of the benefits of planning is if you put your estate, your home, in a revocable living trust. Under present law, Medi-Cal cannot seek reimbursement from it. Now, the value of your home, because of the value of real estate in California, may be such that it will prevent you from qualifying to receive Medi-Cal benefits. But the important thing is by putting your home in a revocable living trust or putting the home of your loved one in a revocable living trust, it protects it from Medi-Cal being able to seek reimbursement from it. It also keeps the home until after the death of the loved one, when a step-up in basis occurs and you don't have to pay capital gains tax on the proceeds of the sale. One of the things, though, that you need to be very cognizant of is that the protections in the revocable living trust are limited just to the home. And so the home can be protected, but if you sell the home, the proceeds from the sale of the home are not protected. And so many times people will sell the home in order to get cash to provide for the care of the loved one. And by doing so, they trigger the reimbursement of the Medi-Cal for whatever monies have been advanced by Medi-Cal at that point. So this is an area that before you do anything with your home, if you're the elder or if you're the caregiver, you need to talk to an attorney. At least once or twice every 2 or 3 months, I see a situation where a family transferred the home into the name of children, thinking by doing so they would avoid probate, which they do, but at the cost of creating a capital gains tax on the property. And since homes in California, many times seniors purchased those homes back in the 60s and 70s when they were only worth $25,000 or $30,000, and they're now today worth $300,000 or $400,000, and in some cases close to $1 million. Well, that capital gains tax can be much worse than probate, and so these are things that should be discussed with an attorney before you take action that may result in difficulties that you didn't anticipate. I put on the chart the cost of long-term care. In my opinion, these numbers are very conservative. The cost of care in a care facility, in my experience here in Orange County, runs somewhere between 4,000 and 7,000, and in most cases, it's closer to the 7,000. And so these are really serious issues from a cost standpoint. I was working with some people the other day creating a Medi-Cal protection trust, and the cost of care for their loved one was going to be almost $20,000 a month. Now, in their case, they had long-term care insurance, but that long-term care insurance only covered about $6,000 of it. And so they were faced with potentially a $12,000 to $14,000 a month additional expense to provide for the care of the loved one. That is a terribly debilitating financial drain on the family and on the family's financial resources. Now, we've talked about the care in a nursing home, but what is the actual care you receive? Well, if you're going into a care facility, these are the things you need to ask about. And you need to give them instructions as to what your wishes are. Your personal hygiene. How often would you like to have your hair or nails done? How often do they give you a bath? Those sound like silly questions, but they are not. And in many care facilities, unless there is outside money being paid, care for the hairdo, care for the nails is an added expense that has to be provided by the family, by the person who is receiving the care. Also, you need to visit and experience some of their meals. We had my Aunt Dolly in a care facility, and we took her out because the food was not satisfactory to her, and I went over and ate with her a couple of times, and I had to agree with her. And so we're caring for her in our home now until we can make sure that she's being properly fed, properly medicated, and is being properly cared for. And that may end up being something where we hire someone to come and live in the home with her to provide care for her. Entertainment. Make sure that there's entertainment that you would enjoy. Many of the care facilities have TVs in every room. Many of them have special entertainment where they bring in people with artistic talent or musical talent. Find out about that. Find out about concerts and live shows. And also establish how easy or difficult it will be for your family to visit you. We're dealing with a crisis right now with this COVID pandemic, where many of the people in these care facilities haven't had a visitor now in 3 or 4 months. And that is creating emotional problems and health problems that none of us would have ever dreamed would have to be dealt with at the beginning of the year. And so these are the kinds of questions you need to ask. What kind of services do you provide? What kind of activities are there for the stimulation and the enjoyment of the residents? How many residents are there? How is meal time handled? Is it something where the people can eat as a group, or is it done in shifts? And how many staff members do they have for each person that's being cared for? And what restrictions do they have? We had a case that we handled where a care facility refused to give any kind of resuscitation to a person who had a seizure. And because they had restrictions on the employees providing any kind of resuscitation, and it resulted in the person suffering permanent disability because of oxygen deprivation. And so these are things that are that are critical to know in advance before you find yourself in a situation of having engaged their services. And but again, I want to encourage you to remember that there is a solution for long-term care provision, and in many cases, it can be done. It's not inexpensive, but it can be done, and it's much less expensive than long-term care insurance or other means of dealing with how you can qualify to receive assistance from Medi-Cal. We have what we call Sarah's Story, and if you haven't seen that, it's something that you should familiarize yourself with, because it's a true story about how we helped a family save over $200,000 over the life of the person because we created planning that allowed her to qualify to receive Medi-Cal benefits. And the family was getting ready to sell a business that had been a family business in order to provide for care when they heard about our ability to provide that protection. And so I would encourage you to if you're not familiar with what can be done, make a consultation appointment with us and come in and talk about it. Remember, Medi-Cal is not Medicare, and that is a vital distinction. Medicare provides for your health care expenses, hospital and doctor, and medical medicines. Medi-Cal provides for long-term skilled nursing care when you can no longer care for yourself. It is a condition that is determined by your physical limitations. In other states, it's called Medicaid, and California's rules are much more liberal than other states' rules. And I'll talk a little bit about that if I have the time in our session. Remember that over 70% of people over age 65 will need some form of long-term care before they pass away. Alzheimer's has increased by 46% as a cause of death. Now, 30 years ago, when my mother developed Alzheimer's was a relatively new circumstance and was almost impossible at that time to diagnose. But today, it can be diagnosed and it can be recognized and it can be treated if it's recognized and diagnosed soon enough to preserve and prolong the person's mental capability. Long-term care expense and care assisted living expense has increased in cost astronomically. And remember, the average length of stay in a skilled nursing facility now is 892 days, not quite 3 years. We used to think that when you went in a nursing home that you would pass away shortly thereafter. That is no longer the case. And with the health care facilities that we have, the length of time that people live in an assisted living circumstance or in a skilled nursing care is substantially longer than it was a few years ago. And this cost of that kind of care is astronomical. In order to pay for your own care and not have your financial resources diminished, you would have to spend, or you would have to have money to invest somewhere between $3 and $5 million to produce enough income to pay for your care in a long-term care facility or an assisted living facility. Now, one of the things that we're dealing with that makes this somewhat more urgent if you're someone who's faced with long-term skilled nursing care needs is that California is discussing implementing the federal Medicaid laws. And up to this point, California has operated under completely different rules and different laws than the rest of the country. And this will affect your family significantly. Now, it's critical, I think, for you to have a family meeting to discuss your care in the event of incapacity or in the event of death. It is critical that you do planning that eliminates the need for a conservatorship if you become incapacitated. And it's also extremely important that you give clear directions on how you want to live out the balance of your life. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is to schedule a complimentary family meeting with us. And by that, I mean you and the people who are part of your life, whether you're the caregiver or whether you're the person who's going to be cared for, come in and meet with one of our attorneys. That probably would be me, and discuss these issues as it relates specifically to your circumstance. Also, if you've enjoyed this webinar, tell your friends and family about it. Have them review the material. Hopefully, I have made this somewhat enjoyable. It's a difficult subject to talk about, but hopefully it has been a benefit to you and will be something that you can use. And at this point, I'm going to turn the session back to our lovely hostess, Myra. You can help the people.
Thank you so much, Lloyd, for all of your insight and wisdom. As most of you know, Kopenbarger and Kopenbarger Law Firm has been in business for over 40 years. We have 8 full-time attorneys and 1 of-counsel attorney, along with over 35 staff members that are highly qualified and happy to help you at any time. We have offices all over the state of California, 7 to be exact, and we can meet in person or through virtual means such as this. Because you attended this webinar today, we want to offer you a complimentary family meeting to discuss your own circumstances with us. We can help alleviate the pressure of caring for a loved one. If we didn't get a chance to answer your questions today, we will most definitely answer it during your family meeting. Our team will be sending you an email with the recorded webinar along with an invitation to a complimentary consultation with you and your family. Remember, proper planning is important, and we are here to help you. We appreciate being your expert referral for all of your professional needs. We look forward to serving you and your family for many years to come. Thank you so much for joining us.